I've travelled to some amazing places in my lifetime, but for some, travelling to Japan or Spain isn't enough for them. Some countries, however, aren't for everyone, but for a small amount of people, this place is on everyone's bucket list. Each year, it only sees 15,000 foreign visitors. It's the hardest place to get a visa, no one is visa exempt, it's not the cheapest place in the world, and it has one of the strictest governments on the planet. In fact, when you search on the internet, you're likely to find this.
There is a country in Central Asia so strange.
It reminds me of my time spent in Pyongyang, North Korea, in every single way possible.
One of the worst places on Earth. That is quite a claim, especially considering the Earth also includes North Korea and Twitter.
The North Korea of the former Soviet Union.
Why is all this? Oh my god. Like, why is all this stuff built, even?
But this is Calibrate the World, and I like a challenge. Joke, I actually really wanted to come. In this two-part series, we travel around the world's most secretive country, which includes the White City made from marble, gold statues, unique horses, Soviet architecture, Soviet accidents, and breathtaking landscapes that cameras cannot do justice. But importantly, to see life inside this former socialist republic. This is Turkmenistan. To preface this video, I wasn't entirely sure whether I could take any videos upon my arrival in Turkmenistan. Arriving was stressful on its own because you have to get all your paperwork in order. I arrived at around 5 AM local time and was due to wake up again at 12 PM to begin my tour of this absolutely mysterious country. So we begin our journey in Turkmenistan's capital, Ashgabat, otherwise known as the White City due to its high density of white marble buildings. Allow me to tell you a bit of a backstory while I show you around this hotel room that screams Liberace. The city was established in 1881, as it was only a tribal village at the time. After being captured by the Russian Empire, it was renamed Polturatsk, but then when it became the Soviet Union, it then reverted back to Ashgabat. Fast forward another 100 years to 1991, Turkmenistan gained independence from the Soviet Union, and Ashgabat was rebuilt as part of the first leader's ambitions, this guy, Murat Niyazov, to rebuild Ashgabat as the White City. So most of the buildings that you see here are either cladded in white or made from white marble. In fact, one of the rules is that they actually enforce all cars in Ashgabat to be white in colour. Sometimes silver or beige is acceptable, but they must be clean, so no taking that out into the desert. Now, Turkmenistan is a country of many unique characteristics. The country is considered a single-party state, despite having elections which saw their current president, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, elected over his father, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. But for years, the country was ruled by Niyazov, who was the leader of all Turkmens, translating directly as Turkmenbashi. But in spite of being a pro-Soviet Union person, he made sure to enforce the reintroduction of Turkmen values following their independence from the USSR. But that meant doing very North Korean-style things. Now listen, people compare this place to North Korea quite frequently. In fact, because North Korea won't reopen their borders to international tourists, in spite of reopening for 2 weeks to visit Razon and the Pyongyang Marathon for some reason, most of them look for the next big thing, and that normally is Turkmenistan. But the thing is, they hate this comparison. But you can't help but to think that there are some similarities. For example, Niyazov renamed bread after his mother. They are a neutral country, which is non-war, but also of self-reliance, which is a little bit North Korean, and even renaming all the months of the year under certain Turkmen values, even though they don't do this anymore. I arrived in September, so that was during the month of Ruhnama. Now, speaking of that, there is a book of literature that is vitally important here, called the Ruhnama, translating to the Book of the Soul, where it has ideas and certain passages that epitomise the lives of a Turkmen person. Apparently, you had to actually recite this to even sit a driving test, but apparently they don't do this anymore, so myth debunked. So apparently it's changed a lot since I first heard about it back in 2018. So yeah, don't come here thinking you're going to get a North Korean style country experience, because it really isn't that, as you'll learn if you stick to this video. Now, I'm here on my own for 5 days, but I have a tour guide who will take me around. We do begin with a car ride to our first destination, which, unsurprisingly, is a monument. Built only in 2001 to commemorate 10 years of Turkmenistan, Independence Monument is on a massive landscape park. On the outside, it features these statues of the Oghuz tribe, which you can actually see on the banknotes. But there's also a star dedicated to them, which looks like this, which is basically a mashrabiyah, but it's not a mashrabiyah. It's just the way it is. I've seen many manicured parks and monuments on my travels, but none seemed as extravagant as this. You'll find that most of Ashgabat's architecture is highly impressive, with no expense spared. Just a walk down from this is a statue of the very person who led Turkmenistan out of the USSR, Turkmenbashi, in his iconic pose, clad in gold. But don't be fooled, that's just very good gold paint. But one thing that you should be aware of is that you shouldn't turn your back to the statue. It's really offensive to locals, and I'm just kidding, that's all bull. I mean, look at this crop picture. Loads of people think that Turkmenbashi utilised the same rules as North Korea with its statues and monuments. Apparently, lots of tourists ask guides this when they see this statue. It's simply not true. So share that with your friends. But I think the reason why they asked this, however, is because of the intricacy of these monuments, because they're quite astounding at first glance. I knew that Turkmenistan was hard to get into, and this comes across as very powerful. Now, that isn't the only monument that you'll encounter on your city tour of Ashgabat, or at least the places that they want you to see. Now, I love a flagpole. I've seen the 9th tallest, and I've seen the 6th tallest, minus a flag. Now, the 12th tallest. The 2nd tallest in Central Asia, if you want to include the Dushanbe flagpole. Our next monument is the Constitution Monument, or aptly named the Syringe. It was finished to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Constitution, so 10 years after the Independence Monument. They seem to like building monuments to commemorate stuff. Of course it's made from marble, but I quite like the fact that it has the emblems of each Turkmen tribe on it. I actually saw this on a lot of everyday things like bus stops, coins, and carpets. I should also mention that Turkmenistan likes to collect Guinness World Records. Some are interesting, some just make you go, For example, the most one, which also forms the cityscape of Ashgabat and the complete randomness of this place, it's the Alabai Cultural and Entertainment Centre, which reaches 95 metres tall. Why is it a world record holder? It's the world's largest indoor Ferris wheel. Yep. I'm not entirely sure why this was made or what it's for, especially when doing retrospective research showing that it was simply to claim the largest indoor Ferris wheel accolade. Turkmenistan as a whole has over 500 world records adjudicated by Guinness, considering that in 2020 Dubai, the Emirate, had around 400 and the United States currently having around 1,000. But we're not done yet, because anywhere that you look, there's another one, like this one, the Altyn radio tower, which is the tallest tower in Ashgabat and Turkmenistan, but that isn't the record. The record that it holds is that it has the largest architectural depiction of a star. Culturally significant, I guess, because it's able to broadcast these things. I've only been out and about in Ashgabat for a hot second, and I'm already seeing the hype from many of the videos that I've seen on YouTube. But what we're about to see is why Turkmenistan has some of the oldest artifacts in the world. Away from the Marble City is a city that dates back to the 3rd century BC. Old Nisa was a Parthian fortress and was essentially 2 towns, split between the old and the new sites. This is the part of Turkmenistan that surprises most visitors. Most people when they Google the country will see the marble white city, but geographically, Turkmenistan was part of the Silk Road and was of importance to the Parthian Empire. As well as being a country with limited foreign visitors, the preservation of these sites and the lack of tourists ruining the vibe allows you to immerse yourself in the moment. There are even original fittings, which have been kept in place. This was explored in depth to ascertain the age and the original elements of the site by Russian and Italian archaeologists, who have since left the site, but they've also left their research behind. This is now the unfortunate reality of a country which doesn't get a lot of tourists, but also doesn't police it in a way that preserves it. This mound of clay pottery, for example, are actual shards from vases and furnishings that were original to the time and the date of Old Nisa. But apparently, this mound was much taller. It's pretty much reduced by 3/4. This is the stuff that you see in museums across the world, and it's just lying here, and foreigners who understand the value of it just take them. It's no wonder that Turkmenistan also went about their business of not just claiming world records, but also getting UNESCO status for a lot of their archaeological sites. They have over 1,300 across the country, the most famous being the city of Merv. This is something that alters your perspective of this very private country and what it meant to the world order before Christ. So if you're into this sort of thing, this is a must visit. As we drive from Nisa to our next location, we get to see the less fancy parts of Ashgabat, but you'll also notice that all the roofs are green. Apparently this is a requirement by the government, but I was also informed that these are made in China and apparently their original colour happens to be green. So there you go. Our next location is the Turkmenbashi Ruhy Mosque, but this one's a little bit controversial for a few reasons. One, I didn't realise I wasn't supposed to film this building because there's guards outside and it's also the resting place of Niyazov and his family. 2, this is an Islamic mosque, but it's not openly recognised, as you'll notice that there's parts of the Quran and the Ruhnama written on the walls. Apparently this really annoyed Muslims both in Turkmenistan and across the world, that this would insist that the Ruhnama would be considered just as important as the Quran. So yeah, bit of a touchy subject, but nonetheless a very interesting mosque. But it does show you the extent of which Niyazov went to preserving a cult following in Turkmenistan, even thinking that the Ruhnama was just as close to the Quran, and, weirdly, banned doggos, but they actually created their own breed and there's now a statue dedicated to that doggo because, doggos are great. This place went from being historically sublime to eccentric very quickly. Again, we simply are immersed by a Guinness World Record because the city has the highest density of marble cladding. The Ministry of Carpets, yes, that's 1000% a thing, and a statue of an Halk horse with supposedly the second president and former dentist Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov on a marble cliff. And an interesting building that... Wait a minute. But out of all of this, the most interesting structure or building here is this one. This is the wedding palace. Weddings are very much celebrated here, and on this particular day, which was a Sunday, there were weddings all over the place, so this one is very much sought after. With this sprawling metropolis, with its pride of being the whitest of the white, it does the monuments the best, I think. But not all of the commemorative things here are celebratory. Some are quite dark. Before my tour of modern Ashgabat ends, I'm taken to the Earthquake Memorial Square. This place has a few monuments and structures that dedicate to those who died during a 7.3 magnitude earthquake in 1948, which killed around 110,000 people. It was one of the most significant natural disasters in the world at the time. But unfortunately, some journalists believe that the truest data of the deaths and the impact of the earthquake was obscured by Soviet propaganda. But it did actually influence a lot of how the infrastructure of Ashgabat is today. But it's particularly significant because Niyazov's family had died during the earthquake, leaving him as an orphan. But this leads me to this particular statue of interest. Now this has mixed connotations. According to a British-based reporter, said that this statue apparently is just a propaganda piece for Niyazov, claiming that the gold child on the statue is meant to be him above the ruins of a disrupted planet. Whereas, in some cases, and what I was informed, the golden child represents a new life and a new world. The bull still being the disruptor and the imbalance of a shaken up world, but I was told that the child represents hope. Both logics make sense, but I probably align more with the latter. This is a very quiet but also staggeringly intricate place to visit. I would consider visiting this place. Now so far we've visited a modern Ashgabat, but Turkmenistan was once under the rule of the Soviet Union. So other than what the internet shows you, I'm about to present to you another side of the city that I couldn't find online. This is an older part of Ashgabat, where a lot of these buildings were constructed during the USSR. These two towers particularly were the first tower blocks ever built in Turkmenistan. But against a leafy backdrop on an autumnal evening, it's a completely different vibe to Ashgabat that I was shown earlier. It's almost European. Also, no international hotel brands operate here, but it's worth noting that the Sheraton did have a hotel in this building because, they get everywhere. But this is my first glimpse into the Soviet-style architecture of Turkmenistan, and unbelievably, it's cosmopolitan. At this point, I was becoming more relaxed and less fearful of being watched. All thoughts of the North Korean vibe had left my consciousness. One thing you should do is to visit the Russian bazaar, where you can get local produce, but also, if you're in a market for a fridge magnet, this is the place, and oh my god, they're good. So moving from this to this, I can't believe that these towns live in parallel with each other. My guide left me for the evening as we prepare for tomorrow, but one thing that you should be aware of is that you can wander about Ashgabat independently, which was something I wasn't sure of before. If you don't believe me, Here's a sneaky video of me alone in an underpass. Quite dodgy, I know. Oh, such a rebel. This is only day 1, and I'm surprised by what I've seen. I thought this was going to be a stressful, paranoid and difficult trip, but so far, it's changed my perspective on what I've seen online. Yes, there are very impressive buildings and monuments, but the historical side from Nisa and the Old Town were things I just didn't expect. Walking around independently was also a bonus point from me. Ashgabat is impressive. If you get the chance to do a day trip here, it's definitely worth it. Next time, I find more mosques, and I pass by this very important village, visit towns outside of Ashgabat. Blue car, more statues, guess the name of this town, hint, it's Turkmenbashi related, and I go to the desert to see something that I will never forget.